The mansion on Whitehaven Drive stands like a monument to silence. If you walk past it today, you'll see the iron gates rusted at the hinges, the hedges grown wild and tangled, pressing against windows that haven't been opened in 27 years. The white columns that once gleamed under Texas sun are now streaked with mold, and the driveway where silver Jaguar once sat is cracked, weeds pushing through the asphalt like fingers clawing toward light. But if you step inside, if you push past the caution tape that still clings to the doorframe, you'll find something that stops your breath. In the dining room, beneath a chandelier thick with dust, 2 crystal candlesticks sit on the table. The wax is frozen mid-drip, hardened in twisted rivers down their silver bases. 2 wine glasses stand beside them, one with the faint ghost of lipstick still visible on the rim. It's as if time itself stopped here, on October 23, 1998. The night Marcus and Vivian Ashford vanished without a trace. This is the story of a perfect couple who weren't perfect at all. A story of wealth that couldn't buy safety, of secrets buried in desert sand, and of a metal box that would remain hidden for 27 years until the truth finally clawed its way to the surface. If you've never heard of the Ashfords, you're not alone. Their disappearance was buried, erased, almost forgotten. But what was found in that box, what those letters revealed, it changes everything we thought we knew about the wealthy, the powerful, and the price they pay when they try to escape the darkness they've created. I'm about to take you deep into one of the most disturbing vanishing cases in American history. And I promise you, by the end, you'll never look at a missing persons case the same way again. If you're ready for a story that will haunt you long after this video ends, make sure you're subscribed to Ultimate Crime Stories and hit that bell icon, because this is only the beginning. Marcus Ashford was born into old Austin money. His grandfather had made a fortune in oil during the boom years, and his father had turned that fortune into real estate gold across Central Texas. Marcus grew up in a world of private schools, country clubs, and summer homes in the hill country. He was tall, always impeccably dressed, with the kind of sharp jawline and easy smile that made people trust him instantly. He went to medical school at Baylor, graduated top of his class, and became a surgeon. For 5 years, he saved lives in operating rooms, his hands steady, his reputation spotless. But surgery wasn't enough for Marcus. He wanted more. In 1991, he left medicine and pivoted into pharmaceutical investments. He had connections, money, and the intelligence to see opportunities others missed. Within 3 years, he tripled his family's wealth. He bought the mansion on Whitehaven Drive in 1994. 8 bedrooms, a ballroom, gardens that stretched back toward oak trees older than Texas itself. It was a statement, a declaration that Marcus Ashford had arrived. Vivian was different. She came from Europe, though she never spoke much about where exactly. Some said Prague, others whispered Paris. She'd been a ballet dancer in her youth, her body still carrying that elegant posture, that controlled grace. She moved through rooms like water, smooth and deliberate. When she came to Austin in 1992, she brought with her a reputation as a jewelry designer. Her pieces were stunning, intricate works that combined rare gemstones with modernist designs. Celebrities wore her creations. Galleries in New York featured her collections. She was mysterious, beautiful, untouchable. Marcus met her at a museum fundraiser. 6 months later, they were married. The wedding was small, private, exclusive. Only 50 guests. No family on Vivian's side. She said they were all gone. Marcus's family attended, though his mother later admitted she found Vivian cold, distant, like she was always performing a role. To everyone who knew them, the Ashfords were perfection. They hosted charity galas where champagne flowed and string quartets played under the stars. They attended opera openings, always in the front row, always impeccably dressed. Marcus in tailored suits, Vivian in gowns that seemed to shimmer as she walked. They had no children, a choice they said was mutual. They wanted freedom, they told friends. Freedom to travel, to build empires, to live without constraints. Neighbors on Whitehaven Drive described them as polite but private. They didn't socialize casually, didn't host barbecues or invite people over for drinks. The mansion was a fortress, beautiful but sealed. The housekeeper, Rosa Martinez, came 3 times a week. She was the only person who saw inside their real lives, and even she admitted they were distant with each other, like 2 actors sharing a stage but never quite connecting. The social calendar of Marcus and Vivian Ashford read like a who's who of Austin society. They were at every important event, every fundraiser that mattered, every gathering where wealth and influence converged. Marcus served on the boards of 3 charitable organizations. Vivian donated pieces to museum auctions that raised hundreds of thousands for children's hospitals. On the surface, they were the embodiment of responsible wealth, of privilege used for good. But there were cracks, small ones that most people missed. Marcus's business partner, Richard Holt, would later recall moments when Marcus seemed distracted during meetings, checking his watch obsessively, taking phone calls in hushed tones and stepping outside. Vivian's gallery contacts in New York mentioned that she'd become increasingly difficult to reach in the months before her disappearance, missing appointments, canceling exhibitions at the last minute. Their marriage, according to those few who saw behind the curtain, had grown cold. Rosa Martinez noticed it first. She'd arrive at the mansion on Monday mornings to find Marcus asleep in the study, still in his clothes from the night before, empty whiskey glass on his desk. Vivian would be in her studio, the door locked, classical music playing so loud it echoed through the halls. They ate meals separately. Marcus would leave early for business meetings that Rosa suspected weren't always business. Vivian spent weekends away, supposedly visiting galleries in Houston or Dallas, though Rosa once found hotel receipts from Santa Fe tucked in a jacket pocket. The perfect marriage was a performance, and both actors were growing tired of their roles. But despite the distance between them, despite the secrets that were already forming, they maintained the facade flawlessly. At the annual Texas Medical Association Gala in September 1998, just a month before they vanished, witnesses described them as radiant. They danced together, Vivian's head resting on Marcus's shoulder, his hand at the small of her back. They posed for photographs that would later appear in society magazines. They laughed at the right jokes, made generous donations, thanked the right people. No one suspected that behind those perfect smiles, behind those coordinated outfits and practice gestures, 2 people were planning separate escapes from a life that had become a prison. October 23, 1998, was a Friday. Autumn in Austin, the air finally cooling after months of brutal heat. The trees along Whitehaven Drive were just beginning to turn, hints of gold and red appearing among the green. Marcus was seen that evening at the Brazos Cigar Lounge downtown. He sat in a leather chair by the window, smoking a Cuban cigar, sipping bourbon. The bartender remembered him because Marcus seemed distracted, checking his watch every few minutes. He made 2 phone calls from the payphone near the restrooms, both brief, both spoken in tones too low to overhear. He left around 7:45, settling his tab with cash, no credit card, which the bartender found unusual. Marcus always paid with his Platinum American Express. Vivian was captured on security footage at the Whole Foods on 6th Street at 8:20. She bought a bottle of wine, Pinot Noir, and a block of imported cheese. She wore a cream-colored coat, sunglasses even though the sun had set, and a silk scarf wrapped around her neck. The cashier, a college student working the evening shift, remembered thinking Vivian seemed nervous. She kept glancing toward the door, toward the parking lot, beyond the glass windows. When the cashier asked if she'd found everything okay, Vivian just nodded, not making eye contact. She paid with cash, counted out the exact amount, and left quickly, her heels clicking across the tile floor. The security footage showed her getting into the silver Jaguar, sitting in the driver's seat for almost 3 minutes before starting the engine. Just sitting there, staring at the steering wheel. Then she drove away. That was the last confirmed sighting of Vivian Ashford. The next morning, Saturday, October 24th, Rosa Martinez arrived at the mansion at 9 o'clock like always. She had a key, a heavy brass thing that Marcus had given her years ago. But when she approached the front door, she noticed it was already unlocked. Not just unlocked, slightly ajar, maybe an inch of space between the door and the frame. Rosa's first thought was that they'd been robbed. Her second thought, the one that made her stomach tighten, was that something worse had happened. She pushed the door open slowly, calling out their names. Mr. Ashford? Mrs. Ashford? Her voice echoed through the foyer. No answer. The silence was heavy, oppressive, like the house itself was holding its breath. Rosa stepped inside. The alarm system panel on the wall was dark, disarmed. That was strange. Marcus was obsessive about the alarm. He said it every night before bed, every time they left the house. Rosa walked through the foyer into the living room. Everything looked normal at first. The furniture was in place, the rugs undisturbed, the artwork on the walls untouched. But on the coffee table, 2 wine glasses sat side by side. One had a lipstick mark on the rim, Vivian shade, a deep burgundy. The other glass was half empty, no lipstick, suggesting Marcus had been drinking from it. Or someone had. The bottle of Pinot Noir stood beside them, still half full. Rosa recognized it as the same type Vivian always bought. In the kitchen, Rosa found Vivian's handbag on the counter. It was a designer bag, black leather, expensive. The bag was open, its contents scattered across the granite surface. Lipstick, a compact mirror, a set of keys to the house, credit cards still in their slots, a wallet with cash visible inside. Rosa's hands trembled as she looked at it. Vivian would never leave her bag like this. She was meticulous, organized, everything in its place. This looked like someone had been searching for something, or like Vivian had been interrupted mid-task, dropping everything in a rush. Rosa moved to the master bedroom. The door was open. The bed was turned down neatly, the pillows fluffed, the sheets crisp and white. But it hadn't been slept in. The decorative pillows were still arranged perfectly, the way Rosa had left them on Friday morning. On Marcus's nightstand, his reading glasses were folded, resting on top of a medical journal. On Vivian's side, a half-empty glass of water sat beside a novel, a bookmark tucked between pages near the middle. Everything suggested they'd been preparing for bed, but had never made it there. Rosa checked the master bathroom. Toothbrushes in the holder, Vivian's skincare products lined up on the counter, Marcus's electric razor plugged in by the sink. Nothing missing. Nothing disturbed. She walked through the rest of the house. Marcus's study looked untouched. His desk organized with stacks of financial documents, pens in a leather holder, his laptop closed. Vivian's studio was the same. Sketches scattered across her drafting table, gemstones in velvet-lined trays, half-finished jewelry pieces waiting for her return. But she wouldn't return. Neither of them would. Rosa checked the garage last. Empty. The silver Jaguar was gone. That's when Rosa called the police. Her voice shook as she explained to the dispatcher. I work for the Ashfords. I came to clean this morning. The door was unlocked. They are not here, but all their things are. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. 2 police officers arrived within 20 minutes. They walked through the mansion with Rosa, documenting everything she'd shown them. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows, no damaged locks. No signs of struggle. No blood. No overturned furniture. No indication of violence. But the unlocked door, the disabled alarm, the scattered handbag, the untouched bed, all of it pointed to something being very wrong. By noon, a missing persons report had been filed. By 2 in the afternoon, Marcus's brother in Houston and Vivian's sister in Denver had been contacted. Neither had heard from the couple in days. By evening, the case had reached Detective Elena Reeves. Elena was a 15-year veteran of the Austin Police Department, one of the best homicide detectives they had. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed. With dark hair she kept pulled back in a tight bun. She'd recently gone through a divorce, her marriage crumbling under the weight of long hours and cases that never left her mind. Her ex-husband had told her she cared more about the dead than the living, and maybe he was right. She threw herself into work because it was the only thing that made sense anymore, the only place where puzzles had solutions and truth could be found if you looked hard enough. When the call came in about the Ashfords, Elena had been at her desk, reviewing files on a gang-related shooting. Missing wealthy couple, no signs of struggle, car gone, the sergeant said. Probably took off for a weekend and forgot to tell anyone. Elena didn't think so. She'd learned to trust her instincts, and something about this felt wrong. When she arrived at the mansion, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. She stood in the foyer, taking in the details. The silence, the stillness, the sense that the house was waiting for its occupants to return. Her partner, Detective Marcus Chen, arrived 10 minutes later. Chen was younger, only 32, but brilliant with patterns and data. He'd worked computer crimes before transferring to homicide, and he had a mind that could see connections others missed. Together, they began to methodically work through the scene. Elena started with the wine glasses. She photographed them from multiple angles, then carefully bagged them for fingerprint analysis. The lipstick on one glass was definitely Vivian's. The color matched a tube found in her bathroom. But whose prints were on the second glass? Marcus's seemed obvious, but Elena had learned never to assume. They'd test everything. Chen examined the handbag contents, cataloging each item. Credit cards present, cash present, house keys present. If someone had been robbed, they'd left behind everything valuable. If Vivian had run away, she'd left without the means to access money or get back into her house. Nothing made sense. In the study, Chen spent an hour going through Marcus's desk. Financial documents were neatly organized in folders, pharmaceutical investment portfolios, real estate holdings, tax returns. Everything appeared legitimate, professional, exactly what you'd expect from a successful businessman. But Chen noticed something. One of the desk drawers, the bottom right, had a lock on it. He tried to open it. Locked. He searched for a key among Marcus's things. Nothing. Finally, he called in a locksmith who worked with the department. The lock was picked within minutes. Chen pulled the drawer open. Empty. Completely empty. But there was a rectangular outline in the dust at the bottom, like something had been there for a long time and recently removed. A box maybe? A file? Whatever it was, Marcus had taken it with him or someone else had. Vivian's studio yielded more questions. Elena stood in the converted sunroom, looking at the beauty Vivian had created. Sketches of necklaces and bracelets covered a large drafting table. Trays of gemstones, sapphires, emeralds, rubies, diamonds, sat in organized rows. Half-finished pieces rested on velvet pads, waiting for Vivian's skilled hands to complete them. But Elena's attention was drawn to the full-length mirror on the far wall. Something about it looked off. She approached slowly, running her fingers along the ornate frame. The mirror was beautiful, gilded edges, antique. But when she pressed against one corner, it moved slightly. She pulled harder. The mirror swung open on hidden hinges, revealing a compartment carved into the wall behind it. Inside the hidden compartment, Elena found items that transformed the case from a simple missing persons investigation into something far more complex. Bundles of foreign currency, Swiss francs, Mexican pesos, maybe $10,000 total. Polaroid photographs, a dozen of them, showing couples Elena didn't recognize. The couples were smiling, casual, at restaurants, on beaches, or standing in front of houses. None of the photos had dates or names written on them. And at the bottom of the compartment, a small leather notebook. Elena opened it carefully. Pages filled with entries in neat handwriting, Vivian's handwriting based on samples they'd found elsewhere in the house. But the entries were coded. Strings of numbers, dates, initials, abbreviations Elena couldn't decipher. MR appeared frequently. VA appeared next to different dates. Other initials too, JM, DM, MC, SC. What did it all mean? Elena bagged everything carefully. This wasn't just a case of a couple taking an impromptu trip anymore. This was evidence of something hidden, something deliberate. Foreign currency suggested international travel or connections. The coded notebook suggested secrets worth keeping. The Polaroids suggested relationships or connections the Ashfords hadn't made public. Chen came into the studio, his expression serious. "You need to see this," he said. He led Elena to the kitchen, to a drawer where Rosa kept cleaning supplies. Tucked at the very back, beneath sponges and dish soap, was a crumpled piece of paper. Chen had found it while doing a secondary sweep. It was a boarding pass stub, Lufthansa Flight 732, Austin to Zurich, Switzerland. Departure date, November 5, 1998. Just under 2 weeks away from the disappearance. Passenger name, Vivian Ashford. Seat assignment, economy class. One-way ticket. Elena stared at the boarding pass. Vivian had been planning to leave. To go to Switzerland alone, without Marcus, without luggage apparently, since her passport was still in the safe. Or maybe she had a second passport, one they hadn't found yet. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but it was fragmented, incomplete. A marriage that looked perfect but was breaking apart. A wife planning to flee to Europe. A husband with locked drawers and secrets. Foreign currency and coded notebooks hidden behind mirrors. And then, on October 23rd, both of them vanished. The interviews began that evening and continued through the weekend. Marcus's brother, Thomas Ashford, drove in from Houston. He was older than Marcus by 5 years, a corporate attorney with a firm handshake and tired eyes. He sat across from Elena in the station's interview room, answering questions with the precision of someone trained in law. "When was the last time you spoke to your brother?" Elena asked. Thomas thought for a moment. 3 weeks ago, maybe. We talked on the phone. He seemed fine, normal. Did he mention any trips, any plans? No. Did he seem worried about anything? Stressed? Thomas hesitated. Marcus always seemed stressed. He was driven, ambitious. That was just who he was. But in the last year, maybe, he'd become more closed off. We used to talk regularly, but he'd stopped calling as much. When I'd ask if everything was okay, he'd say it was fine, just busy with investments. Elena leaned forward. Did you know about his pharmaceutical investments? What specifically was he investing in? Thomas shook his head. He didn't share details. Said it was proprietary, confidential. I know he'd made a lot of money, but I didn't ask questions. Maybe I should have. Did you like Vivian? The question seemed to catch Thomas off guard. He shifted in his seat. Honestly, I never felt like I knew her. She was polite, elegant, but distant. At family gatherings, she'd smile and make small talk, but it felt performative. My wife said the same thing. Vivian was beautiful, fascinating, but you never got close to her. There was always a wall. Vivian's sister, Claudia Brennan, flew in from Denver the next day. She was younger than Vivian by 3 years, blonde where Vivian was dark-haired, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of Vivian's usual designer clothes. She sat in the same interview room, her eyes red from crying. Vivian called me 3 weeks ago, Claudia said, her voice shaking. Late at night, maybe 11. She said she needed to talk, that something was wrong. I asked what, and she went quiet for a long time. Then she said, never mind, it's nothing. I should have pushed harder. I should have made her tell me. Did she mention Marcus? Elena asked. Claudia nodded. She said things with Marcus weren't good. That they'd made mistakes, both of them. I asked what kind of mistakes, and she said she couldn't talk about it over the phone. She wanted to visit, said maybe she'd come to Denver for Thanksgiving. But she never confirmed. When I called her back a few days later, she didn't answer. I left messages. Nothing. Tell me about Vivian's past, Elena said. Where did she come from? Claudia's expression darkened. That's complicated. Vivian didn't talk about it much. Our parents died when we were young, a car accident. Vivian was 16, I was 13. We went into foster care, got separated. Vivian ended up in New York, I stayed in Colorado. We didn't reconnect until we were adults. By then, Vivian had reinvented herself. She'd become this elegant, sophisticated woman. She told me she'd studied dance in Europe, worked in galleries, built a whole life. I believed her, but sometimes I wondered how much of it was real. Did she ever mention being involved in anything illegal? Anything dangerous? Claudia shook her head firmly. No, never. Vivian was creative, artistic. She designed jewelry, went to gallery openings. She wasn't involved in crime. But Elena caught the hesitation in Claudia's voice, the way her eyes shifted down and to the left. There was something Claudia wasn't saying, or something she suspected but didn't want to believe. Rosa Martinez came to the station on Monday. She'd worked for the Ashfords for 8 years, arriving every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 in the morning to clean, to prepare meals, to maintain the massive house that always felt too empty. Rosa was in her 50s, a quiet woman with calloused hands and a gentle manner. She sat in the interview room, her fingers twisting a tissue. They were kind to me, Rosa said. Always paid on time, gave me bonuses at Christmas. Mr. Ashford would ask about my family, my grandchildren. Mrs. Ashford would sometimes give me jewelry pieces that didn't sell, beautiful things I could never afford otherwise. But were they happy? Elena asked. Rosa's expression grew sad. No, not for a long time. Maybe they were once, when they first married. But in the last 2 years, they grew apart. They barely spoke to each other. Mr. Ashford would leave early in the morning, sometimes not come home until late at night. Mrs. Ashford spent hours alone in her studio. I'd hear her crying sometimes. Rosa reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. I started writing things down, she said. Not to spy, just, I noticed things. Strange things. She opened the notebook. Last July, I found packed suitcases in the garage. 2 of them, hidden behind old furniture. When I came back the next week, they were gone. In August, I answered the house phone because Mrs. Ashford wasn't home. A man asked for Michael. I said there was no Michael here, and he hung up. In September, I found burned papers in the fireplace. The house has central heat. They never used the fireplace. Someone had burned documents. I could see fragments, numbers, names. I didn't think much of it then, but now Elena took the notebook. This was evidence of a couple planning something, hiding something, preparing for something that never came. Marcus's business partner, Richard Holt, was interviewed that same afternoon. Richard was in his 50s, balding, with the nervous energy of someone who'd built success through worry and attention to detail. He'd been partners with Marcus for 6 years, co-investing in pharmaceutical startups and medical technology companies. We had a good thing going, Richard said. Marcus had the medical background, understood the science. I had the business connections, knew how to structure deals. We made money, a lot of it. But in the last 18 months, Marcus changed. How? Elena asked. Richard rubbed his face. He started taking meetings without me. He'd fly to Mexico City or Zurich and not tell me why. When I'd ask about the trips, he'd say they were exploratory, looking at new opportunities. But we were partners. We were supposed to make decisions together. I started to suspect he was moving money without telling me. Did you confront him? Yes, about 6 months ago. He got defensive, said I was being paranoid. He showed me some paperwork for a pharmaceutical deal in Mexico, said everything was legitimate. But I didn't believe him. The numbers didn't add up. I hired a forensic accountant to look at our partnership books. She found discrepancies, money moving through shell companies, offshore transfers. When I tried to talk to Marcus about it, he shut me down. Said if I kept digging, I'd regret it. That was 2 months before he disappeared. Did he threaten you? Not explicitly, but the message was clear. Back off, or there would be consequences. The investigation expanded rapidly. Chen worked 18-hour days, diving into financial records, pulling bank statements, tracking credit card transactions. What he found painted a picture of a man living 2 financial lives. Marcus had the legitimate accounts, the ones tied to his investments with Richard, the ones that showed steady, legal growth. But beneath that layer were others. An offshore account in the Cayman Islands, opened in 1995, current balance $2.3 million. Deposits made regularly, always in amounts just under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements. $20,000 here, $30,000 there, all cash deposits made at different banks across Texas and New Mexico. Chen traced the source of some deposits back to shell companies, businesses with names like Southwest Medical Consulting and Lone Star Pharmaceutical Holdings. When he dug into these companies, he found they were registered to a man named Michael Ross. No social security number on file, no tax returns, just a name and a P.O. box in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Chen pulled property records for Michael Ross. A hit came back immediately. 50 acres of land outside Las Cruces, purchased in 1996 for $75,000, paid in full, cash transaction. No mortgage, no paper trail beyond the deed itself. Chen stared at the deed signature. Michael Ross, written in a bold, confident hand. He compared it to Marcus Ashford's signature on other documents. The loops were different, the slant altered, but the baseline pressure and letter formation was similar. Marcus had created an alternate identity and used it to buy property in New Mexico. But Vivian had secrets too. Chen found credit card statements under her name showing purchases in Santa Fe, jewelry supplies from specialty stores, hotel stays at boutique properties, always paid in cash after the initial reservation. She traveled to Santa Fe 7 times in the 18 months before she disappeared. Sometimes the trips overlapped with Marcus's travel to New Mexico, but often they didn't. She was going alone, staying alone, buying supplies alone. Chen contacted the hotels. the manager at Casa Encantada, a small luxury hotel in Santa Fe's historic district, remembered Vivian. Beautiful woman, very polite, always paid cash. She'd stay for 3 or 4 days, spend her time visiting galleries and art supply stores. Did she meet with anyone? The manager thought for a moment. Once I saw her having coffee in the courtyard with a man. Tall, glasses, looked professional. They seemed intense, like they were arguing quietly. But I only saw him that once. Chen found more. A storage unit rented in Albuquerque, under the name Victoria Aldridge. When he pulled the rental agreement, the signature matched Vivian's handwriting. Local police obtained a warrant and opened the unit. Inside they found art supplies, canvases, expensive paints and brushes. But also documents, copies of birth certificates and social security cards for Victoria Aldridge, a New Mexico driver's license with Vivian's photo but Victoria's name. This wasn't just a casual alias. This was a fully constructed identity. Elena flew to New Mexico with Chen. They needed to see the property, talk to people who might have seen Marcus or Vivian under their false names. The Desert Star Motel sat on the edge of Las Cruces, a low-slung building with faded turquoise doors and a flickering neon sign that read vacancy. The manager, a man in his 60s named Bill Kowalski, kept meticulous records. Elena showed him photos of Marcus and Vivian. Bill nodded immediately. Yeah, I remember them. They stayed here 3, maybe 4 times over the last couple years. Always paid cash, always stayed in room 7. Last time was, he checked his ledger, September of '98. Checked in for 3 nights, but left after 2. What names did they use? Elena asked. Bill flipped pages. Michael Ross and Victoria Aldridge. Always separate names, like they weren't married or didn't want people to know they were together. Did anything unusual happen during their stays? Bill hesitated. The last time they were here, September, there was an argument. Loud enough that the people in room 6 complained. I knocked on their door, asked them to keep it down. The man, Michael or Marcus or whatever his name was, answered. He apologized, said everything was fine. But I could see the woman behind him, Victoria or Vivian. She looked scared. I almost asked if she needed help, but then she smiled and said they were just having a disagreement. They left the next morning, didn't even check out properly, just left the keys on the table in the room. Can we see room 7? Bill led them down the row of rooms. He unlocked the door, and they stepped inside. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale air. Nothing remained from the Ashford stay. The room had been cleaned and rented dozens of times since then. But Elena moved through it slowly, trying to imagine what had happened here. An argument, Bill had said. About what? About running away? About the secrets they'd been keeping? About whether they could trust each other? Chen was in the bathroom. He crouched beside the sink, examining the space behind the exposed pipe. His fingers brushed against something soft. He pulled it free carefully. A silk scarf, deep blue with gold threading, Vivian style, unmistakable. It had been wedged behind the pipe, probably dropped and forgotten in a rush. Chen bagged it. Later they tested for DNA. Confirm it was hers, but Elena already knew. Vivian had been here, arguing with Marcus, scared enough that the motel manager noticed, and then they'd fled in a hurry, leaving pieces of their false lives behind. The property outside Las Cruces was harder to find. The address was just coordinates, no street name, no landmarks. They drove down Highway 25, then turned onto a dirt road that quickly deteriorated into tracks barely visible in the sand. The desert stretched endlessly around them, scrub brush and rocks and sky. After 3 miles, they saw it, a small white trailer sitting alone on flatland, its paint peeling, windows covered with plywood. Chen parked, and they approached on foot. The trailer door was locked, but the lock was old, rusted. Chen stepped back and kicked hard. The door sprang open with a crack of splintering wood. Inside, the air was stifling, hot from years of sun beating down on the metal roof. Camping supplies lined one wall, sleeping bags still in their packages, a Coleman stove, lanterns, water jugs. Someone had been preparing to live here, or at least to survive here for a while. A folding table sat in the center of the small space, and spread across it were maps. Maps of Mexico, detailed road maps showing routes from the Texas border down through Chihuahua, Durango, all the way to Baja California. Certain towns were circled in red ink: Cabo San Lucas, La Paz, small coastal communities where Americans retired and asked no questions. Routes were marked: highways and back roads, places to cross the border away from official checkpoints. Elena photographed everything. This was an escape plan, detailed and deliberate. But there was more. On a narrow shelf above the table, Chen found 2 passports. He opened them carefully. United States passports, but the names inside were Michael Ross and Victoria Aldridge. The photos showed Marcus and Vivian, but different from their society portraits. Marcus without his usual styled hair and expensive suits, just a casual photo, glasses, simple shirt. Vivian without makeup, her hair pulled back plainly. They looked like ordinary people, the kind who could blend into any small town and never be noticed. The passports were professionally made, not cheap forgeries. Someone with connections had created these identities. Beneath the passports, a stack of photographs. Marcus and Vivian, but relaxed, genuinely smiling. Standing in front of a small house with a red tile roof, holding margaritas, wearing shorts and t-shirts. Another photo showed them on a beach, sunset behind them, arms around each other. These weren't the stiff, formal images from Austin society pages. These were pictures of 2 people imagining a different life, a simpler life, a life where they could escape whatever was chasing them. But the most disturbing discovery was in a cardboard box tucked in the trailer's tiny closet. Chen pulled it out, set it on the table, opened it. Inside were more photographs, but these weren't of Marcus and Vivian. These were of other couples, strangers, smiling in restaurants or at beaches or standing in front of homes. Some photos had names written on the back in Vivian's handwriting. Jennifer and David, Phoenix. Miguel and Sophia, El Paso. James and Patricia, Dallas. Chen counted 12 different couples across maybe 30 photographs. Who were these people? Why did the Ashfords have photos of them hidden in a trailer in the New Mexico desert? Elena felt a chill despite the heat. She pulled out her phone and called the Austin office, got Chen's assistant on the line. "I need you to run names for me," she said. She read off the names from the backs of the photos, cross-referenced them with missing persons databases, Southwest region, last 10 years. The assistant said she'd get back to her within the hour. Elena and Chen sat on the trailer steps, staring out at the desert. The sun was beginning to set, the sky turning orange and pink. "We're not just dealing with a couple who disappeared," Chen said quietly. "We're dealing with something bigger." Elena nodded. These people in the photos, if they are connected to Marcus and Vivian, if they are all missing, then we're looking at a pattern. A network. Maybe a criminal organization. The call came back 40 minutes later. Elena's hand tightened on the phone as she listened. Of the 12 couples identified in the photographs, 8 had been reported missing over the past decade. Jennifer and David Morrison disappeared from Phoenix in 1995. Miguel and Sofia Castellano disappeared from El Paso in 1997. James and Patricia Henderson disappeared from Dallas in 1994. The list continued, couple after couple, all vanished without a trace. All wealthy professionals. All childless. All cases that had gone cold with no bodies, no suspects, no resolution. And Marcus and Vivian Ashford had photographs of them hidden in a secret trailer in the desert. Elena stood, her mind racing. This isn't just about the Ashfords anymore. This is about multiple disappearances, possibly multiple murders. We need to bring in the FBI. Chen agreed. Whatever Marcus and Vivian were involved in, it was far beyond a local case. It was interstate, possibly international, and it involved victims across multiple jurisdictions. They drove back to Las Cruces as darkness fell, the desert highway empty and endless. Elena couldn't stop thinking about those photographs, about the smiling faces of people who'd vanished. Had Marcus and Vivian been victims too? Or had they been part of whatever system had made those others disappear? 3 months passed. The FBI established a task force, bringing together agents from Phoenix, El Paso, Dallas, and Albuquerque. The case files of all the missing couples were compiled, analyzed, cross-referenced. Patterns emerged. Every couple had been wealthy, professionals in fields like medicine, finance, or art. Every couple had been childless. Every couple had disappeared suddenly, leaving behind homes that looked lived in, cars that were later found abandoned but intact. And in several cases, investigators found evidence of offshore accounts, false identities, and property purchased under assumed names in Mexico or New Mexico. It was as if someone had been targeting specific types of people with money and the means to disappear, and either killing them or forcing them into some kind of underground network. But the Ashford case remained the most detailed because of what they'd left behind. The coded notebook from Vivian's hidden compartment became a crucial piece of evidence. FBI cryptographers worked on it for weeks, finally cracking the system. The initials weren't just random. MR and VA were Marcus and Vivian's aliases, Michael Ross and Victoria Aldridge. But the other initials matched the missing couples. JM and DM were Jennifer and David Morrison. MC and SC were Miguel and Sofia Castellano. The dates next to each set of initials corresponded to their disappearances. Vivian had been documenting something, keeping a record of people who'd vanished. But why? The numbers in the notebook were even more revealing. They were bank account numbers, amounts transferred, dates of transactions. The FBI traced them to a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts. Money had been moving through this network for years, millions of dollars laundered through pharmaceutical companies, art galleries, real estate holdings. And at the center of it all, connections to a Mexican cartel, Los Fantasmas, the ghosts. The cartel specialized in making people disappear, not just killing them, but erasing them, using their identities, draining their accounts, and then disposing of the bodies where they'd never be found. An FBI agent named Sarah Hendricks, a specialist in cartel operations, briefed Elena and Chen. Los Fantasmas has been on our radar for a decade, she said. They are sophisticated, not like the brutal street cartels you see on the news. They target professionals, people with clean records and access to money. They force these people to launder cartel funds through their businesses. If the person cooperates, they make good money. But if they try to leave, if they threaten to expose the operation, the cartel makes them vanish. Sometimes they kill them outright, but often they stage disappearances, make it look like the person ran away or was kidnapped. It creates confusion, makes investigation harder. So Marcus and Vivian were working for the cartel? Chen asked. Hendricks nodded. Almost certainly. Marcus's pharmaceutical investments were perfect for laundering money. Vivian's jewelry business and gallery connections provided another avenue. They probably started voluntarily, attracted by the money. But once you're in, you can't get out. The couples in those photographs, they were all in the same situation. Professionals forced to work for Los Fantasmas, and when they tried to escape, they disappeared. But then why did Marcus and Vivian document everything? Elena asked. Why keep records of the other couples? Why create that notebook? Hendricks considered this. Maybe they were planning to use it as leverage. Bargaining information. If they could gather enough evidence about the cartel's operations, maybe they thought they could trade that information to the FBI in exchange for protection. Or maybe, and Hendricks' expression softened, maybe they felt guilty. Maybe they knew what was happening to these other people, and they wanted to make sure someone would eventually find the truth. That theory gained support when the FBI raided the storage unit in Albuquerque rented under Victoria Aldridge's name. In addition to the art supplies and fake identification, they found a locked metal case hidden beneath a false bottom in a cabinet. Inside the case were more documents, ledgers detailing transactions between Los Fantasmas and various businesses across the Southwest. Names of cartel members, dates of meetings, locations of safe houses. And tucked in an envelope, a handwritten letter from Vivian addressed to whom it may concern. The letter was dated September 30th, 1998, less than a month before the Ashfords disappeared. The letter read, "If you're reading this, something has happened to us. My husband Marcus and I became involved with dangerous people who traffic in money and death. We thought we could play their game and win, but we were wrong. Over the past 5 years, we've watched as other couples, good people who made the same mistake we did, were swallowed up by this organization. Some were killed. Others simply vanished, their identities stolen, their money drained. We documented everything we could, hoping that someday it might bring these people to justice. We planned to run, to disappear and start new lives where they couldn't find us. But I don't think we'll make it. They are watching too closely. If our plan fails, if we don't escape, please use this information to stop them. Don't let our deaths be meaningless. The letter was signed simply, Vivian. Elena read the letter 3 times, each time feeling the weight of Vivian's words. These weren't cold criminals. These were people who'd made terrible choices, gotten trapped, and tried desperately to find way out. The question remained, had they succeeded? Or had Los Fantasmas caught them first? The answer would come 27 years later, from hikers in the Guadalupe Mountains. But in early 1999, as winter settled over Austin, the case began to shift. The silver Jaguar was found on January 17th, abandoned near an old limestone quarry off Highway 290. The discovery reignited the investigation, bringing new evidence and new questions. The car sat in a clearing, surrounded by scrub brush, maybe 50 yards from the quarry's edge. It had been there for months, exposed to rain and sun. A rancher named Dale Hutchins had been checking his fence line when he spotted the silver paint glinting through the brush. He'd approached cautiously, seen the Texas plates, and called the sheriff. Elena and Chen drove out immediately. The Jaguar looked abandoned, forgotten, like someone had parked it and walked away without looking back. The windows were down, leather interior cracked and stained by weather. Leaves had blown into the back seat, creating a carpet of decay. The keys were still in the ignition, hanging there as if mocking them. Chen pulled on gloves and opened the driver's side door carefully. The smell hit immediately, mildew and something else, something faintly metallic. He examined the seats. The passenger seat had a stain, small but distinct, rust-colored against the cream leather. Blood, almost certainly. On the driver's side floor mat, a larger smear, also blood, but a different pattern, more spread out, like someone had stepped in it and tracked it across the carpet. The forensics team arrived within an hour, processing every inch of the vehicle. They photographed the blood stains, swabbed for DNA, dusted for fingerprints. On the dashboard, barely visible unless you looked at it from the right angle, were carved initials, VA plus MR. The letters were rough, done with something sharp, maybe a key or a knife. Deliberate. The forensics team also found something tucked under the passenger seat, a folded piece of paper. An evidence tech pulled it out with tweezers, unfolded it carefully. A gas receipt, faded but readable. Junction Gas and Go, Junction, Texas. Dated October 27, 1998. 4 days after the Ashfords had disappeared. Someone had driven the Jaguar 150 miles west to Junction, filled it with gas, 4 days after everyone assumed Marcus and Vivian were gone. Elena stared at the receipt. This changes everything. The timeline we had, the assumption they vanished on the 23rd, it's wrong. They were alive days later. Or someone was driving their car. The blood analysis came back within a week. 3 distinct blood types. Type A negative on the passenger seat, matching Vivian's medical records. Type O positive on the driver's floor, not matching Marcus. His records showed type A positive. And a third sample, type B positive, found on the interior door handle. 3 people had bled in that car. One was almost certainly Vivian. But who were the other 2? Chen went back through every piece of evidence, every interview, looking for mentions of other people in the Ashfords' lives. He found something in Rosa's notes, the housekeeper's little notebook. An entry from mid-October, 2 weeks before the disappearance. Man came to house while I was cleaning. Didn't knock, just walked in. Scared me. He asked for Mr. Ashford. I said Mr. Ashford wasn't home. Man said he'd wait. I told him he couldn't, I was working. He left but looked angry. Tall man, maybe 40, dark hair, scar on his cheek. Drove a black truck. Chen showed the note to Elena. A visitor, unannounced, aggressive. Could be a cartel enforcer, checking in on Marcus, making sure he stayed in line. The FBI brought in a sketch artist to work with Rosa, trying to create a composite of the man. The result was a drawing of a hard-looking man with a thin scar running from his cheekbone to his jaw. They ran the image through databases, comparing it to known associates of Los Fantasmas. A hit came back. Eduardo Salazar, nephew of the cartel's founder, known enforcer, suspected in at least a dozen murders across Mexico and the southwestern United States. But Eduardo had been killed in a cartel power struggle in 2000, shot in Juarez. If he'd been the visitor to the Ashford mansion, he was dead now, unable to answer questions. But the blood evidence suggested violence. 3 people bleeding in the car meant a confrontation, a struggle. Elena built a theory. On October 23rd, Eduardo or another enforcer came to the mansion. He told Marcus and Vivian they were out of time, that they needed to come with him to Mexico. Maybe they'd been planning to run, and the cartel found out. Maybe Marcus had moved money he wasn't supposed to touch. Whatever the reason, the enforcer was there to collect them. They got in the Jaguar, all 3 of them. Maybe they drove willingly at first, thinking they could talk their way out. But somewhere between Austin and Junction, something happened. A fight. Maybe Marcus tried to overpower the enforcer. Blood was spilled, 3 people injured. The Jaguar ended up at a gas station in Junction. Someone, maybe the enforcer, maybe Marcus, filled the tank. Then they drove to the quarry. And Elena couldn't finish the thought. What happened at the quarry? The search teams combed the area around where the Jaguar was found. They used ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, metal detectors. For 2 weeks, they searched a 5-mile radius. Nothing. No bodies, no grave sites, no evidence of violence beyond what was in the car. It was as if Marcus and Vivian had simply evaporated. The FBI's theory was that the cartel had taken them across the border into Mexico, probably killed them, and buried them somewhere in the vast desert of Chihuahua or Durango where they'd never be found. Los Fantasmas had decades of experience making people disappear permanently. But Elena wasn't convinced. Something about it didn't fit. If the cartel wanted to kill them, why the elaborate staging? Why abandon the car in a place where it would eventually be found? Why leave the keys in the ignition, the receipt under the seat? It felt deliberate, like someone wanted the car discovered but not immediately. Like someone was buying time. Time for what? The case went cold again. Months passed, then years. The FBI task force was dissolved in 2000, the agents reassigned to other priorities. Elena kept the file on her desk, would occasionally pull it out and review the evidence, looking for something she'd missed. But there were no new leads, no breakthroughs. The families of all the missing couples had been notified, given what closure the investigators could provide, which was very little. Marcus's brother Thomas hired a private investigator who turned up nothing. Vivian's sister Claudia started a foundation for missing persons, using her grief to help others. The mansion on Whitehaven Drive was sold to a developer who turned it into event space, then eventually into a historic site. Life moved on, but the questions remained. Elena retired in 2010, after 30 years with Austin PD. She'd solved dozens of cases, brought justice to countless families, but the Ashford case stayed with her. It was the one that got away, the puzzle she couldn't solve. She'd dream about it sometimes, about walking through the empty mansion, about standing at the edge of that quarry, about Vivian's face in the photographs, smiling in her fake life with Marcus, both of them trying so hard to escape. And then, 15 years later, in October 2025, a metal box was found in the Guadalupe Mountains. 2 college students, Sarah Chen and Michael Rodriguez, had been hiking through a remote canyon, following a dry creek bed. Sarah was a geology major, interested in the limestone formations. She'd noticed something odd, a rectangular depression in the sand near the canyon wall, too regular to be natural. They'd started digging, expecting maybe an old cache from ranchers or a lost hiker. What they found was a military ammunition box, the heavy metal kind that's built to last decades. It was locked with a rusted padlock that broke when Michael hit it with a rock. Inside, wrapped in plastic bags to protect against moisture, were items that would reignite a case everyone had forgotten. Passports, both real and fake, Marcus and Vivian Ashford, Michael Ross and Victoria Aldridge. Jewelry, beautiful pieces that matched Vivian's signature style, probably worth tens of thousands of dollars. Bank documents showing account numbers and transaction records. Maps with locations marked in Mexico. Photographs, dozens of them, showing Marcus and Vivian with other couples, the same couples whose disappearances had been linked to Los Fantasmas. And letters, 2 letters, handwritten, sealed in plastic, waiting 27 years to be read. Sarah's hands had shaken as she pulled out the letters. On top of everything was a laminated card with a simple message. If you find this, please contact the Austin Police Department. Tell them it's about Marcus and Vivian Ashford. The students had hiked back to their car, driven to the nearest town, and made the call. Within 24 hours, the FBI had the box. Within 48 hours, Elena Reeves, now 68 and long retired, received a call from her old lieutenant. "You need to come see this," he said. "It's about the Ashfords." Elena had driven to the FBI field office in Austin, her heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. They showed her the contents of the box, spread across a table in a secure evidence room. She'd picked up Vivian's letter first, the one dated September 30th, 98. The one explaining their involvement with Los Fantasmas, their guilt about the other couples, their desperate hope that the evidence would someday bring justice. Then she read Marcus's letter, his confession of how he'd been recruited, how the money had seemed so easy at first, how by the time he realized what he'd gotten into, it was too late to escape. But there was a third letter, one Elena hadn't expected. It was dated October 20th, 1998, just 3 days before the Ashfords disappeared. The handwriting was rushed, less careful than the others. It was from both of them, written together. "We're running out of time," it began. "They know we've been gathering evidence. An enforcer came to the house today, told Marcus we have 72 hours to deliver documents we're supposed to have destroyed. If we don't, he said our families will die. We've made copies of everything, hidden them in places they won't find. This box is our insurance policy. We're hiding it tomorrow, in a canyon we found on one of our trips. It's remote, difficult to access, perfect for something we need to stay hidden for years. If you're reading this, it means our plan failed. It means we didn't make it to Mexico, didn't manage to disappear into new lives. It probably means we're dead. Use what's in this box to stop Los Fantasmas. Make our deaths mean something. Tell our families we're sorry." The letter ended with both their signatures, Marcus and Vivian, written side by side. Elena sat back, the letter trembling in her hands. They'd known. In those final days, they'd known they probably wouldn't survive. But they'd taken the time to hide this evidence, to create a trail that would eventually lead to justice. The USB drive in the box contained even more. The FBI's tech team extracted hundreds of files, spreadsheets detailing 6 years of transactions, money laundered through Marcus's pharmaceutical investments and Vivian's art dealings. Names of cartel members, locations of safe houses, routes used for smuggling. And most damning, a list of the missing couples with notes about how each one had been recruited, exploited, and eventually disposed of when they became liabilities. Using this information, the FBI launched a new investigation. They cross-referenced the data with current intelligence on Los Fantasmas, which had evolved over the decades but still operated using similar methods. In coordination with Mexican authorities, they identified 6 locations marked on the maps in the box as burial sites. Over the next 3 months, excavations were conducted. The first site, an abandoned hacienda outside Chihuahua, yielded 2 sets of remains. Dental records confirmed they were Jennifer and David Morrison, the Phoenix couple who'd disappeared in 95. The second site, near Juarez, held the remains of Miguel and Sofia Castellano. The third, fourth, and fifth sites each contained bodies, all matching missing couples from the 90s. But the sixth site was different. It was located outside a small town called San Ignacio, in a valley surrounded by rocky hills. The excavation team dug for 3 days, finally reaching what was clearly a grave, the right size, the right depth, clearly prepared to hold 2 bodies. But it was empty. No remains, no clothing, no evidence that anyone had ever been buried there. The lead investigator stood at the edge of the empty grave, looking down into the hole they'd carved out of the desert. "This was meant for the Ashfords," he said. "But they were never put here." Elena flew to Mexico to see the site herself. She stood where the investigator had stood, staring down at the empty earth. "So what happened?" she asked. "Where are they?" The investigator had a theory. Maybe the plan changed. Maybe whoever was supposed to kill them and bury them here couldn't go through with it. Or maybe, and he paused, maybe Marcus and Vivian fought back. Maybe they escaped. Elena wanted to believe that. But 27 years, if they'd escaped, why no contact? Why not come forward once the cartel members started being arrested? Unless, Elena thought, they were still afraid. Still hiding. Still living as Michael Ross and Victoria Aldridge in some quiet place where no one asked questions. The evidence from the box led to indictments of 12 members of Los Fantasmas. Most were arrested in Mexico, a few in the United States. The trials would take years, but the evidence was overwhelming. Families of the missing couples finally had answers, bodies to bury, closure after decades of not knowing. Marcus's brother Thomas was interviewed by the news. "I always hoped Marcus would come home," he said, tears in his eyes. "But at least now I know he tried to do the right thing in the end." Vivian's sister Claudia held a small memorial service, even though there was no body. She spoke about Vivian's beauty, her talent, her complicated life. "She deserves to be remembered as more than a victim," Claudia said. She fought back. She documented the truth. That takes courage. Elena returned to Austin, to the mansion on Whitehaven Drive, which now offered tours on weekends. She paid the admission fee and walked through the rooms one last time. The dining room still had the replica candlesticks, the tour guide explaining how they were frozen mid-drip to represent time stopping. Visitors took photos, whispered theories. The tour guide, a college student earning money between classes, recited the story she'd memorized. "And they were never found," she said. "Some people think they are still alive somewhere, living under new names. We'll probably never know for sure." Elena stood in the back of the group, listening. "But we do know some things now," she thought. "We know they were criminals who became informants. We know they tried to save others and themselves. We know they hid evidence that brought down a cartel and gave families closure. That's more than most people leave behind." After the tour, Elena drove through Austin, past the cigar lounge where Marcus had been seen that last night, past the Whole Foods where Vivian had bought wine, past the police station where she'd spent so many hours working this case. She thought about the empty grave in Mexico, about the letters hidden for 27 years, about two people who'd lived double lives and paid for it in ways we might never fully understand. That night, she sat at her kitchen table and wrote a final report, knowing it would be sealed in evidence files and probably never read by anyone outside law enforcement. But she needed to write it, needed to put down her final thoughts on the case that had haunted her for decades. "I believe Marcus and Vivian Ashford are alive," she wrote. "The evidence suggests they were supposed to be killed and buried in that grave outside San Ignacio, but something prevented it. Perhaps they overpowered their captors. Perhaps they were helped by someone with a conscience. Perhaps they simply got lucky. The empty grave tells us they were meant to die, but it doesn't prove they did. The box they left behind wasn't just evidence. It was a message, a declaration that they'd existed, that they tried to fight back, that they wanted the truth to survive even if they didn't. Whether they are living quietly under assumed names in some small town, or whether their remains lie in an unmarked grave somewhere in the desert, we may never know. But their legacy isn't a crime. It's a courage to document the truth and hide it where it would eventually be found." Over the following years, there were unconfirmed sightings. In 2015, a jewelry piece appeared at an auction in Barcelona, a necklace with Vivian's unmistakable style, intricate silver work surrounding a rare blue sapphire. The auction house wouldn't reveal the consignor, citing privacy policies. In 2019, a medical clinic in Costa Rica reported a doctor who'd worked there briefly, an American in his 60s with surgical skills and a quiet manner, who'd left suddenly when someone started asking questions about his background. The description matched what Marcus Ashford would look like now, older, grayer, but still with those steady hands and sharp features. In 2022, a woman was photographed at an art gallery opening in Buenos Aires, elegant, silver-haired, wearing a scarf in a style Vivian had favored. The photo was blurry, taken from across the room, and by the time investigators in Argentina followed up, the woman was gone. Were these breadcrumbs? Were Marcus and Vivian leaving traces, letting people know they'd survived? Or were they just coincidences, the human tendency to see patterns where none exist? Elena didn't know. She'd passed 80 now, living in a small house in the hill country, tending a garden and reading crime novels in her retirement. Sometimes she'd get calls from true crime podcasters or documentary filmmakers wanting to discuss the Ashford case. She'd usually decline, but occasionally she'd agree, carefully explaining what could be made public and what remained sealed evidence. The mansion on Whitehaven Drive still stands, a monument to secrets and the lives we hide behind facades of perfection. The candlesticks are still there in the dining room, forever frozen mid-drip, a moment preserved in wax. Tour guides tell the story to new generations, each one adding their own theories and interpretations. Some believe Marcus and Vivian were evil, predators who got what they deserved. Some believe they were victims, trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Most believe the truth is complicated, that people can be both victim and perpetrator, both criminal and hero, depending on which moment of their lives you examine. In the evidence room at Austin PD, the metal box from the Guadalupe Mountains sits on a shelf, its contents catalogued and stored. The letters, the passports, the photographs, all waiting in case someday, somehow, Marcus and Vivian Ashford walk through the door to reclaim their story. But that day hasn't come, and as the years pass, it seems less likely. The double lives they built, the escape they planned, the secrets they buried, all of it remains suspended between fact and mystery, between truth and speculation, like wax frozen mid-drip, like a story that refuses to end. And perhaps that's fitting. Perhaps some stories aren't meant to have neat conclusions. Perhaps the questions that linger are more important than the answers we force. Because the Ashford case isn't really about whether they survived or where they might be now. It's about the choices we make when we're desperate, about the price of wealth and status, about the possibility of redemption even after terrible mistakes. It's about two people who built a perfect life on a foundation of lies and then tried, in their final act, to tell the truth. The candlesticks still sit on the table. The mansion still stands. And somewhere in the world, maybe in a coastal town where palm trees sway and no one asks too many questions, maybe in a quiet suburb where neighbors mind their own business, or maybe in an unmarked grave in the Mexican desert, Marcus and Vivian Ashford exist in that space between life and death, between guilt and innocence, between the people they pretended to be and the people they actually were. Their story is a reminder that beneath every perfect surface, there might be cracks, secrets, desperate plans sketched on maps and hidden in canyons. That wealth can't buy safety and power always demands payment. That sometimes survival means becoming someone else entirely, and sometimes redemption means leaving behind evidence of the truth even when you can't escape yourself. If this story has captivated you, if it's made you think about the secrets people keep and the prices they pay, then I want you to do something for me. Subscribe to Ultimate Crime Stories. Hit that notification bell. Because there are dozens of cases like this one, mysteries buried in forgotten files, stories of people who vanished and left behind only questions. Stories about the darkness that hides in plain sight, about crimes that seem impossible to solve until one detail, one piece of evidence hidden for decades, brings everything into focus. I'm going to tell every one of those stories, and I want you there with me. Searching for truth in the shadows, asking the questions that need to be asked, remembering the people who deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, the truth is always stranger than fiction. You just have to know where to look.